time at 4:01, we will call the City of Beaumont Economic Development Committee meeting to order. At this time, I will ask Ms. Wheelwright to call the order, the roll, please.
Oh, well, I don't need to see.
Councilmember Santos is absent this evening. Councilmember Fenn.
Here.
City Manager Todd Parton. Economic Development Manager Kyle Warzinski.
I'm here.
Member Ahmed stated he would be absent. Member Beneke.
Present.
Member Brown.
Present.
Member Getka.
Here.
Member Coblin.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Chairman Lawson.
Present.
Member Moran.
Present.
Member Rader.
Present.
Member Vince.
Present.
School student Angelina Segovia. Kashanda Samuel.
Present.
And Trina Fregoso. All right.
Thank you. We've already received the report of any requests for excused absence. At this time, if you would do the honor, I will ask Mr. Bench to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America,
And
and
to
to
the
the republic
republic
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty and
justice for all. I don't know about you, every time I hear those words, they warm my heart. They become even more and more important each and every day. Thank you, Member Vance, for doing that for us. Thank you. Are there any adjustments that we should be aware of to the agenda? Ms. Wheelwright.
I have none.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's see. Now, let's go to conflicts of interest disclosure. Are there any conflicts of interest that we should be aware of? None. Are hearing none. We'll move on to public comment period. Ms. Wheelwright, are there any public comments for this body, please?
I have no written comments. Heather, do we have anyone on the line?
no calls.
All right, fantastic. Hearing none, let's see. We're going to move on to approval of the minutes. If you will review your minutes, I will entertain or ask for a motion to approve our minutes in a second, please.
I will move to approve the minutes.
I second.
It has been moved and properly seconded that the minutes will be approved. At this time, Ms. Wheelwright, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Councilmember Fenn.
Yes.
Kyle Warzinski.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm going through my list. Member Beneke.
Abstain. I was in at the meeting last week or last month.
Member Brown. Is he on here? Member Getka.
Aye.
Member Coblin. Is he in attendance yet? No. Chairman Lawson.
Aye.
Member Moran.
Yes.
Member Rader.
Yes.
Member Vince.
Yes.
And and that's it. I'm sorry. That motion passes.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wheelwright. Thank you to the members. At this time, we will move to updates of projects from the city, and I will defer to Mr. Warzinski and his staff.
Thank you, Committee Chair. Very short update for you tonight, but I did want to let the committee know that at the City Council last night, the City Council did award a contract to a contractor to perform the annual citywide street rehab project totaling roughly $5 million. It's notable for us that we're continuing with these annual citywide rehab and rehabilitation and maintenance of our streets. You may have seen the streets that were improved at the last citywide update. You may have driven on them. Very nice upgrade. So I believe we're rolling those out annually now. That's part of the plan in terms of the capital improvement plan. So we're excited that council awarded that contract, and we should be seeing those items gear up in the near future. The next item I wanted to discuss with the committee is we've been doing some meetings with a couple of the larger businesses throughout the community, and then I've been meeting with some of the smaller ones as well. And it probably comes no surprise to any of you, but the community in the businesses themselves are all in hiring mode. They all have job vacancies. They all need to hire staff at different level positions throughout the community, whether it's fast food restaurants, fast casual, sit-down dining, some of the larger employers, whether it's the typical distribution centers or some of our manufacturing folks, all need employees. So last year, unfortunately, we weren't able to get off the ground with our third annual job fair, but this year we're going to start that up again. So we are scheduled to have the job fair. We're doing our initial studies in terms of the employers that would like to participate in that job fair being held here at City Hall in the gym. And we're aiming for a date in November, but that date has not been solidified at this point in time. But as soon as I have that available, I will be sending that out, including the job fair flyer, so that each of the Economic Development Committee members that represent some of the employers in the city can participate in that. And if you don't, and you'd like to pass it along to some of your friends in the business community or other people that you may frequent their businesses that are in need of hiring, please let them know about it. And hopefully we'll have a great event, and then hopefully people within the area can attend that and find local jobs. We do know that a tremendous amount of our residents drive more than 30 to 35 minutes to get to work each and every day, and that over 20% of the population here in Beaumont has a bachelor's degree or higher. So a lot of those folks, if we were able to create local jobs, qualify for those local jobs and might want to lessen their commute by hours sometimes in some scenarios. So hopefully this job fair aligns some of those job seekers up with the employers that need to hire some folks. So that concludes my updates from city staff tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Warsinski. It is good to see you. I know you've been spending a lot of great time with that family, and we hope those young ones are doing great. Let's see, at this time, we have a retail recruitment update, again from our Mr. Warsinski.
Thank you, committee chair, members of the committee. So a couple meetings ago, probably more than a couple meetings ago, some time ago, the Economic Development Committee received a report from our consultant, the retail coach, on the results from our data analytics, demographics, psychographics analytics that was performed pursuant to the council contract that was awarded late 2020. So now that we had the analytics complete, we've taken the next stage in that contract, and really the next stage in our retail recruitment strategy that the city has put forth. So we do have a brief presentation from the retail coach. So Austin Farmer from the retail coach is on the line and able to go through this presentation. We're pretty excited with not only the data analytics, creating that primary retail trade area, but also the work that's been ongoing since you all have received that last update. And I believe he's going to kind of prime you on the work that's been done so far, and also provide you a snippet on what we're going to continue to work on in the near future. So with that, Austin, I will kick it over to you.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Mr. Chairman, council, or committee, I'm sorry. It's great to be with you. Thanks for the introduction, Kyle. I think I last talked to you in April and wanted to just give you a quick update on where we're at in our process and share some of the feedback that we've gotten from retailers and restaurants as we've been out there recruiting them to the community. So a lot of good high-level information. There's not super detailed specifics in this presentation, but we can provide those after. If you'd like those, we can send those through Kyle as well. But wanted to really fill you in on what we've done since we last talked in terms of the actual recruitment efforts for the city. So in our last presentation, we talked about our total scope of work and where we were in the process. So back in April, we had just finished the first 5 phases of our process, which included doing a market analysis, identifying the retail trade area for the city using that cell phone data and really identifying who that core customer is and where they're coming from to shop and dine in the community. And then more importantly, where they go when they're leaving the community so we can really fill those retail gaps. And since then, we've started that retailer and developer recruitment, and we've actually been out actively recruiting retailers, restaurants, family entertainment businesses, a wide spectrum within that retail category to Beaumont. We're probably about halfway through that phase right now. So our contract goes through the end of December. And so we've been doing that recruitment for the past few months, and we'll continue to do that through the end of December. To date, just to give you some numbers in terms of what that recruitment looks like, we've actively recruited over 60 retailers and restaurants for the community. And that list of 60 retailers and restaurants came from our retailer matching. So looking at the data, that consumer profile, the retail leakage, all of that data and reporting that we did on the front end, we use that to compile what we call retailer match list. And that match list was just over 60 retailers and restaurants that we started with for the community. And so we've actively been recruiting them really since about May. So in that April-May timeframe, started that recruitment process and have gotten a lot of really good feedback out of that process. We've actually had 3 site visits from retailers to date. So that means 3 retailers, restaurants that are interested in the community that have come to actually look at sites and really analyze and spend time on the ground looking at the community, which is a great sign that shows us there's interest, especially with where we're at right now coming out of COVID. We've seen a lot of positive momentum. And so having those site visits and having that retailer feedback come back strong has been really good for us. We think that we're going to get more site visits that will materialize over the next 90 days. So as we go through really October, November, December, we see a lot more potential for some additional site visits as well from retailers and restaurants that are interested in the community. And currently, as it stands, about 30, there's approximately 35 of those retailers and restaurants that are still actively reviewing sites in Beaumont. So that means that we've established a connection with them. They've looked at the market and they're going through their internal review process with their real estate teams to really identify if it's a site that makes sense for them to expand into. And so we're actively essentially selling them those sites, trying to get that interest level and to get them to commit to those sites. The graphic you see here is our retail recruitment dashboard, which is our tracking mechanism. So Kyle and the economic development staff have full visibility into our recruitment process. And so this little snapshot is an example of that dashboard where they can actively track and see the conversations we're having with all these retailers and restaurants, when we last talked to them, what their feedback's been. So we actually put their quotes and we'll copy their emails or leave notes about their voicemails in that dashboard. But we feel to this point, we've gotten a lot of really good feedback, especially with timing coming out of COVID. All the feedback that we've gotten to this point has been pretty positive. There have been a few retailers that have said, hey, we're not interested in the market, or the market doesn't fit for our expansion plans. But in terms of that negative feedback, it's really mostly been around a few key areas that we'll talk about here in a second. So as part of that recruitment process, when we get interest from these specific retailers and restaurants, what we're doing on the back end of that is we've put together custom site profiles for all the available sites in town, whether it's existing retail space or developable land. So some of those key developable areas that we're looking at in terms of new developments. And we've put together those site profiles to share with those retailers and restaurants. And then in some cases, when we've had strong interest from specific retailers, we've put together custom site analyses packages for them that go into depth on their nearest locations, cannibalization, really highlighting the opportunity and highlighting the specific site in Beaumont. So we've done that for all the retailers that we've actually gone out and recruited. We put together custom feasibility packages for them on the front end. But when we do have strong interest, we're also developing custom packets that are very specific to a couple of opportunities to really help sell them on those sites. So in terms of feedback, the feedback we've gotten to this point when it comes to the negative feedback or why people aren't committing to the market, there's really been 3 key categories that we've seen in terms of not having interest in the market. The first one's timing. And that really breaks out into 2 categories: timing in the sense of brand timing and expansion timing. So there's a quote there that we've gotten from one of the retailers where they said, hey, we're not ready to expand in the Beaumont market. And a lot of that has to do with their overall expansion plan and how they're expanding out from Redlands moving east and what their kind of regional strategy is. So not necessarily a knock on the Beaumont market in the sense of they just don't want to be in Beaumont. It's more about timing and how they actually push out from certain markets. Another example there is still determining our post-COVID expansion plans. We've seen that a lot. There's still a lot of retailers that survived and made it through COVID, but they're still trying to figure out what that expansion looks like post-COVID in this new world. So there's, I'd say there's probably about 10 or 12 of those that we've been communicating with on a regular basis that could potentially have interest in the market. They just don't know what their corporate strategy for expansion is, or they may have to wait. Theaters are a great example of that. Most of the theaters that we've talked to have said, hey, this market will work for us. But most of those theaters are still trying to figure out what the post-COVID world looks like for movie theaters and in-person movies. So they could be 12, 18, 24 months out based on what their expansion strategy is. That second category is interested in the market, but they need a franchisee. So a lot of fast casual and even some casual sit-down restaurants are franchisee driven. And so the quote there that we got was, we don't currently have an active franchisee in this market, but please send us information and we'll share it out with our potential franchisees. So that's a good sign because it means that they're interested in the market, but they just have to figure out what that looks like from a franchisee perspective. So they either have to have an existing franchisee that can step up and either buy the rights to the market or be able to fill that role. Or in some cases, we're able to actually bring entrepreneurs and community members to the table that might want to be a franchise and open one of these concepts. So we've been working with Kyle and the team there to see if there's any opportunities to identify local community members that might have the financial means to become one of those franchisees and see if we can actually kind of home grow some of those as well. But that's a good sign that there is interest, even though there's not a franchisee. That means that the market is still appealing to those brands. The third is specific site needs. So we're talking to a larger retailer right now who said, hey, I'd love to look at sites. Send me what you have over 100,000 square feet. I need a 100,000 square foot building that we can be an anchor in, or we have to build one. So that's an example of not necessarily saying no to the market and being interested in the market, but just not having a site ready, available to go and trying to figure out what those mechanics look like. And then another example there is we're looking for a prime intersection with more visibility and better accessibility. So we have some sites that work in the sense of I-10 frontage or we have proximity to where they want to be, but there's some accessibility issues. So if you think about some of the shopping centers along I-10, there's not a direct in right off of a direct exit. And so sometimes that can prevent some of those retailers from picking one of those available sites. But in terms of feedback that we've gotten for not coming to the market, these are all, as weird as it sounds, this is all really good bad feedback, if that makes any sense. Most of the time, retailers and restaurants, if they're not interested in the market, won't give us a lot of details into why they're not interested in the market. So it's good to see that these are all things that we think we can overcome. The franchisee one is a little bit harder because if we're going to help remove that roadblock, we have to provide some people that could potentially be those franchisees, or the corporate office has to find one there internally. but the timing aspect is good because it's not a no, it's a not right now, which could always turn into a yes, especially in the real estate world in 6 months, 12 months, maybe even 18 months. So it's great to see they're engaging with us and at least looking at and reviewing the market. And then on the specific site needs, we're working with Kyle and the team there to really either do what we can to help overcome those from the city's perspective. And I know that you guys are working on a lot of those right now in terms of accessibility and infrastructure. And then on the other side of that, just working with local property owners, development owners to really coordinate with them and say, hey, we think we can get this retail or restaurant, but here's what they need. We had a great conversation with a local property owner a few weeks ago. I was able to spend the day with Kyle and Carrie there at the city, and we got to drive around to a few sites and kind of look at some of those issues and talk through those and meet with a local developer and get her take on it and get, really kind of work with them and coordinate. So that's been good in terms of trying to overcome that negative feedback that we've gotten. So in terms of where we go from here for the next 3.5, 4 months, we'll focus on continued recruitment. So doing whatever we can to push the ball forward with all those retailers, restaurants, developers that we've been talking to, as well as coordinate with property owners, brokers, and developers. So really work with everybody in that space to do what we can to make those connections and find those sites and help push those interested retailers across the hurdle. We actually just started preparing for the International Council of Shopping Centers Recon Conference. So that's actually the biggest real estate conference in the world. It happens typically pre-COVID. It happens every May in Las Vegas, and it's huge. It takes up the entire Las Vegas Convention Center. They had to push it back. They canceled last year's and pushed this year's back to December. But we're just now starting. So really towards the end of this month and in early October, we'll be working on behalf of the city to set up meetings for that conference. So we'll be setting up meetings for Kyle to meet out there in Las Vegas with retailers, brokers, developers, a lot of those decision makers that we've been communicating with and really focus on that side of the recruitment piece and meeting in person there. And then the last one is, we've been focused on this list of just over 60 retailers and restaurants, but we're running additional void analyses and looking at comparable markets and developments to expand that prospect pipeline. So we're actually going out and trying to find additional retailers, restaurants, entertainment centers, different concepts that we can add to that pipeline. Realistically, over the next 30 to 45 days, that 60 plus retailers that we're recruiting will probably turn into about 100 plus. And so we'll look at a lot of other kind of smaller regional options we might not have explored yet, some local options, and then even some different concepts that might not have a location in the state yet, but that are actually looking at expanding into California. So we'll continue to build that pipeline and really focus on how we can take advantage of all the positive momentum we have and the good feedback we have and push them across the edge, but make sure we're leaving no stone unturned too, and that we're going out there and really finding retailers and restaurants that fit and helping them get into the market. So that was all I had in terms of update. I'd love to, I'm not sure if we have time or not, but I'd love to take any questions if there's any questions on just the recruitment process or where we're at or any of those upcoming events or stuff we're working on.
Mr. Farmer, let me say thank you so much for an outstanding presentation, and we absolutely do have time, so we'll open it up and entertain any questions or comments from members.
I have a question for Austin. Out of the potential site surveyors and companies, was there any concerns shown or addressed to you regarding our current highway infrastructure and street system?
There has been mostly around interchanges and accessibility, just both on the north and south side of I-10. Some of those interchanges are pretty difficult or tricky. A lot of them, the way they are now, with some of them being elevated, you have a tough time with visibility, and then there's not that direct access. So, some of those top shopping centers in town, you've got to kind of snake back in behind it and have the connection and the feeder roads go through. That has come up. That's something that I think is going to be a challenge no matter what. I think the stuff that you currently have planned and all of the projected changes and development I've seen there looks like it'll help solve that problem. But I'm not sure how much of that you can overcome other than, providing as much visibility and accessibility as possible. And most of that's going to be around those core interchanges or those core on and off ramps and how people interact with those existing shopping centers.
The chair recognizes Member Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. Austin, thanks for the presentation, the update. I have a question for you on the cell phone data that you're using. How precise is that, from the to and from location?
It's pretty precise. We like to say it's within about 90% accuracy in terms of what's out there currently. It's the most accurate that we have, kind of the industry gold standard. There's always going to be some variance of that where it's not 100% accurate, but
of course, yeah.
It's about as close as we can get. And I'd say it's probably about 90% given the GPS accessibility and just the kind of current market conditions with people using cell phones.
If it might be okay, I might want to follow up with you on an offline conversation unrelated to Beaumont's efforts. I work with the county's economic development office, and would be interested in knowing the accuracy and sort of scope of that for other purposes. So maybe I could get your email.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Are there any other comments and or questions from the members?
Yes. Vaughn?
Member Vince?
Yes.
Recognize Member Vince?
Thank you.
Your
I
mic
was
is
going to
off.
ask this. I was going to ask the same question about the roadways and stuff. I'm not too much concerned a lot with the visibility from the I-10 as I am with the gridlock that's going on down there right now. We're going to have a real big issue come if everything opens up here at Christmas time. I've been down there before and stuck for an hour and a half down there. So therefore I try to avoid that area. And I think that some of your clients or some of the potential businesses look at that. And is there a timeline on what the road was going to be extended through to Pennsylvania, the expansion on Highland Springs? If it was me, I wouldn't be getting any more businesses down there right now until we address the traffic issue.
I think that we would defer this question back to either Mr. Warsinski or to Mr. Parton if he's in the meeting here with us. I don't think that Mr. Farmer can answer that one.
Yeah,
Mr.
Chairman.
Warsinski, do you want to address that?
Yeah, Chairman, I'll go ahead and answer that. I could put it on Austin, but I don't think that'll be fair for him to answer that one tonight.
I didn't want to do that to Mr. Farmer.
Exactly. So I think the sentiment about the traffic within that corridor down there on 2nd Street and Highland Springs is warranted. That is some of the feedback we're receiving from some of the retail groups and the businesses that are looking at that area in terms of mobility and traffic. One thing to keep in mind is some of these retailers like the traffic numbers, right? They like to see a lot of people within that area. What they don't like to see is the congestion or the time it takes to get through some of these intersections, and as well as the interface with the train at Pennsylvania.
Yep.
So those are the main items that we're working on. As you all know, in the Economic Development Strategic Plan, the document that City Council approved calls out for Public Works to work in concert with Economic Development and with City Council administration to design facilities ahead of their time. Obviously, we just completed that strategic plan a couple years ago, so it was impossible for us to have all of that infrastructure in before the Walmart and the Best Buy and so forth. So now we're planning a little bit of catch up out there, but we have started design of 2nd Street, extending that facility all the way out to Pennsylvania. We are also in design on the widening of Pennsylvania from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. And then ultimately there will be design on the Pennsylvania interchange coinciding with the grade separation that would go underneath the railroad. So that's the ultimate plan. In terms of timing, I'm not going to sit here and try to guesstimate when that interchange or the grade separation may or may not occur due to the price tag. In terms of the design on the two other streets, 2nd Street in Pennsylvania, I don't want to put my colleagues in Public Works on the spot or anything like that, but realistically, those typically take 1 or 2 years to get through all the permitting and design and so forth. And then it's been my experience here working for the city that typically we're not designing new facilities that we don't have any intention on building. So I think that once we complete the design, once we attain all the different types of permits that we need within that area, we would go ahead and program that to actually start construction. That should alleviate a lot of the concerns within that area. And then ancillary to that, we can focus on the Highland Springs interchange that's currently, I wouldn't say bogged down in traffic, but limited in certain times of the day. And our Public Works Department has partnered with RCTC, so Riverside County Transportation Commission, as well as the City of Banning, on a redesign of that interchange. And I know that they're currently studying that as we speak. The idea that at least was floated around, there was multiple options, that were floated around, but the primary option that they're looking at in terms of a redesign that potentially would work with the existing structure. So if you're familiar with that, like most of us are, the street has a little bit of a constraint when you go underneath the freeway, right? So there's really not an ability to create an additional lane north and southbound without modifying the entire freeway structure. So there is another option, which is called a diverging diamond. And if you're bored tonight, when we're done with this meeting, go ahead and Google search it. And you should, Dr. Brown, because I wasn't sure what it was. And I looked at it and I was very pleased with it, but also somewhat scared because I don't know exactly how I'm going to get on the left side of the road to go north and then vice versa. So there's a way it works. The engineers have done it. It works flawlessly in other areas. And apparently it will move the traffic much better because by changing over sides of the street, people are able to go left onto the freeway if you're going northbound without stopping at the light. You know how we right turn on red? Well, it's the same thing if you're on the other side of the street. And if everyone wants to go left onto westbound 10, and we're on the left side of the street, as opposed to the right side where we're normally at, you can free flow onto that freeway. So I don't know if it's going to work. Obviously, that's what we're studying, but it was a sigh of relief that we possibly have found an option to fix that issue without rebuilding the entire interchange, which, as you can imagine, would be a hefty lift in terms of the price tag. So I know that's a long-winded answer on kind of what we're doing. I just wanted the committee to understand that we've identified this through the strategic plan process. Now that the feedback is coming in from the development community, it shows us that we're right on the mark in terms of what facilities we're designing and which ones we're looking forward to constructing in the near future. If the development community working with Austin and myself were saying, hey, this is all great and we want other improvements somewhere else in town, then we may be pivoting and focusing on other areas. But we seem to have pinned the local issues on those streets exactly where the retailers and the restaurants are telling us our focus should be on improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Warsinski. The chair recognizes Councilperson Finn.
Yes, thank you, Austin. Thank you. And I appreciate the proactive approach in trying to reach out to businesses. I do have a question. It might either be you or Kyle to answer this, but are you made aware of any businesses that aren't doing well that might be coming to the city or through you to say, hey, things aren't working. Maybe we have to downsize our location. Maybe we have to, to pack up and close up. and that open up an opportunity for somebody else? Is there anything like that you guys catch wind of or are able to research?
Thank you,
We,
Council.
I'll probably defer to Kyle on that. We haven't spent as much time on that front, but I know Kyle's been keeping close tabs on those kind of situations.
Yes, thanks, Austin. And Councilmember Fenn, that's a great question. That's part of our business retention and expansion program here at the city, is to try to get a pulse on what the existing businesses are doing, if they're thriving, if they need to expand, or conversely, if they're looking at contracting or possibly relocating or shutting down. I know a lot of the focus on economic development is typically attraction and what are you bringing next. But I always have to remind myself that all the businesses that are here today that produce sales tax dollars, that produce jobs for our community are valuable, oftentimes, in my opinion, more than the new ones that we're trying to attract, because they're already here. They're already members of our community. So we reach out to them through in-person meetings, site visits, as well as surveys that we do once or twice a year. Currently, we haven't heard too much about anyone that's looking at slowing down or moving out beyond a couple handful of businesses that have chose to sell their business. I've seen some of those. There's others that we're keeping a mindful eye on, just because they weren't doing the greatest headed into the pandemic, but at this point in time, as we sit here today, they're still open and surviving. But yeah, that's when it's those in-person meetings and those survey results in which they really open up to us on what their challenges are, and what they may need from the city or my counterparts at the county, through Rob's folks, in order to keep them here or to help them grow or expand.
Okay, and so if we did come across a business that was struggling and they are reaching out for help, we like multiple tools in our toolbox to offer to them to help them out, correct?
Yeah, we would do the best we could.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions and or comments from committee members, please?
I have a question.
I don't know who I'm talking to, but you're recognized.
Alan Coblin.
Come right on, sir.
Austin, I may have missed this, and I apologize if you already stated this or not. Based on your feedback you're getting from restaurants, those that are not interested, what's the biggest obstacle that they've said the city presents?
The biggest obstacle right now, I think, is timing is the biggest issue we're seeing, specifically with restaurants, because of the post-pandemic, post-COVID growth and expansion. A lot of restaurants are having to rethink their concepts and rethink their actual expansion plans. We haven't had a ton of retailers. We've actually had very few. I can't think of any off the top of my head that have said the market just won't work for them. So the data that we're sending out has been received well. People have looked at it. They see, from what we can tell, opportunity. Most of those have been either that timing component of they just haven't figured that expansion plan out yet, or it doesn't fit into their current expansion plan that they probably came up with pre-pandemic or 2018, 2019. But that's been the biggest that we've seen right now, is just that timing component and having it fit into their expansion schedule or their predefined expansion plans.
Okay, so you haven't gotten any feedback that the demographics don't support the average check price that these restaurants have?
We haven't.
That's good. All right.
Yep. Yeah, the demographics have been actually very well received. We had one of the retailers that we've had a few conversations with. When he first looked at it, he said, is this for Beaumont, or did you send the wrong city? And he was actually kind of pleasantly surprised by it. So that's been really, we're looking at that optimistically. That's been really good. I say it a lot, but most retailers and brokers and site selectors, they don't waste time. So if they don't see it, they'll tell you they don't see it. So we haven't gotten a ton of that feedback. The only thing close to that that I can think of is that we had a retailer say that the market wouldn't work for them because there was already one of the largest retailers in their specific retail segment in the market. So they didn't think that they could necessarily come in and compete in the market. But that's about as close as we've gotten. We haven't had anybody say that the demographics just aren't there or that they don't think that there's enough demand, specifically on the restaurant front as well.
That's good. Thank you.
And Committee Chair, can I add on to that?
Yes, sir.
So, as Austin said, Committee Member Coblin, we haven't received too much of that so far. One of the reasons that may be true is that we've created a very strategic match list that we're going out and recruiting retailers with and restaurants with. So we haven't recruited every single restaurant to the city. We've recruited ones that are actively looking at the Southern California region, that have expansion plans, that meet the demographics that our trade area presents. So we might get that sort of response if we reached out to, let's say, a Ruth's Chris, right? Like if we went and I told Austin, go ahead and call Ruth's Chris and get him here, and then let me know what they say. We may get that response from them. But the way we've designed our retailer match list was to be on point with what our region really has to offer and not to go after like a Tesla dealership or a Maserati dealership where we would get that instant no because the demographics were quite off and different than what they were looking for. So Austin, I don't know if you want to touch on that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've been very targeted. So there have been some on that list that are on the upper bounds of what the market could support price-wise, but we haven't seen that from them yet. Another great example of what Kyle was talking about is when we were in town a few weeks ago, we spent some time walking the hospital property with the development that is out on the front side of that on the pad sites that are going to go up there. And we talked about strategically going after some of those restaurants that might be a little outside of that typical range we'd see for a community like Beaumont because of the hospital population over there and because of the professional presence and trying to make that into more of an elevated development. So when we start reaching out to some of those that are a little bit more elevated on that full service or casual sit down restaurant side, we'll probably get some of that from those that may not see the ticket price there. But from those that we started with that have been very targeted, we haven't had that any of those responses yet.
Thank you. Again, members, are there any additional questions or comments? Additional questions or comments from Mr. Farmer or Mr. Warsinski? One more. Additional questions or comments for Mr. Farmer or Mr. Warsinski?
I do have a question.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, we have Betty Rader, our Executive Director with the Chamber of Commerce. Is there anything that we can do to help support recruitment of retailers, or once they are interested, refer them over to the Chamber to maybe gather more background information? We have an excellent staff there that have been here a number of years. They know a lot about the city. Was that something that could offer value to potential new retailers or businesses coming into the area? I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, we certainly, we usually don't have a lot of people that are interested in searching out the community prior to their coming here. Usually they've already decided to open their business and then they come to the chamber wanting to either participate in the chamber's events or take advantage of all the membership information and the information that we have on other members at the chamber. But we certainly would entertain anything that we could do to assist with the recruitment of any new businesses. Due to COVID, we used to meet with Kyle on a regular basis, almost monthly, and work on the businesses that were coming in. Usually they were already determined to be coming in, but with COVID, we haven't started that back up again, but hopefully we can shortly.
Thank you, Ms. Rader. Thank you for the question. Additional questions or comments?
I have one question.
Yes, sir, please.
I'm just curious, you know, we cast a wide net out there and hope to catch a few fish. Once we catch those fish, what's the process of really, you know, reeling them in and getting all the T's crossed and I's dotted? It may be a little bit of a, you know, it is a process. I'm just curious how we follow through to the end where we actually start putting some brick and mortar together and some neon signs and paving some parking lots. I know there's permitting involved, there's a potential zoning variances, whatever. I'm just kind of curious, you know, if what that process is, just from an informational standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Austin, do you want to touch on how you get the retailer to the finish line, and then I can opine on the city process once they're ready to go with us?
Yep, you beat me to it. That's where I was going. Yeah, so great question. We, on the front end, we do everything we can to drive that high level interest. And then when we get that interest from them, our goal is to get them to the community for a site visit and to connect them with the appropriate property owner, leasing agent, broker. So really, most of that front end work of really getting them to the community and getting them into a site is really where we focus. So from driving the high level interest to getting specific sites in front of them, to making a connection and then getting them in. And then from there, Kyle works with those development owners and brokers to really go through the planning process and the city side. And so that's a lot more detailed, but that's kind of the handoff point for us is we get them to submit an LOI or sign a contract on a property. And then Kyle works from the city side to make sure that that goes through and the city's doing what they need to get all those documents and planning process in place.
So then once we get them here, once they're looking at the different sites, once they're discussing the lease or purchase options from the developer, we're kind of a little bit on the sidelines, hopeful and waiting, because ultimately the city doesn't own the property. The business wants to buy a certain pad, right? Or they want to buy an anchor store. They want to lease it for 25, 50 years. And we need that business and the landowner to come to agreement on terms and price. So we don't really interject ourselves into that process because we don't typically belong there as a government entity. We do urge both sides to negotiate and hopefully work something out. And ultimately, if a project works, then they'll come to an agreement on a terms and price. And sometimes those things don't happen. And then we start back with Austin to find them an additional site throughout the city that they may be able to get working in terms of business and cost and all those fun things. So assume that we get past that hurdle, which is the people that own the project agree to let the business in. The business agrees to the price and the terms. Then we start with the city process. There would be two. So for like the San Gorgonio specific plan, that was approved many years ago. So what we were doing there was we weren't recruiting businesses to that center that wouldn't be allowed. So that project was already approved. It had certain sized buildings. So everyone we recruited there was to fit within the buildings that were already approved, so it didn't have to go back through the planning process. So that project is one example. They go ahead and they start with their building plans, get those reviewed and plan checked by my colleagues here at City Hall. And then ultimately they get into the building process once their plans are approved and go ahead and construct, get all the inspections with Public Works and Building and Safety and so forth. Now, currently, right as we sit today, we don't have too many of those projects that are entitled, like San Gorgonio Village. So that takes the next step, which is, okay, they love a site, that project has a conceptual site plan that they're out there shopping, so they get an LOI, so a letter of interest, and that retailer wants to come into that development. But the development's not approved yet through the city. So now they have to have the developer, the person that owns the property, submit plans and environmental documents to the planning department, and then go through the review process and ultimately be approved or denied at the planning commission, and sometimes, depending on the level of approval, the city council. Once that's done, then they get kicked into that building stage. So right now, we're working with different developers that are in pre-application status, some of them that have applied but have not yet been approved. So that's kind of where we're sending some of these retailers now. And some of them we're sending to pieces of dirt out there that have no plans approved, and just saying, look, this is a great 20-acre site, but all the heavy lifting is going to be in the future if you decide that this is going to be your permanent location moving into the future. As you can imagine, speed to market is a critical component of some of their site selection. So if they really like that 20 acres, but there's nothing approved on it, and they know it's going to be 2 or 3 years before their store can actually be open, they may look somewhere else. Or if we're really the right market and location for them, then they end up progressing and opening it in 2 or 3 years. But as you can tell by that timeline, it's critical that we, as the economic development staff in the city, work with our current landowners today on what projects they're going to try to get approved in the near future, or if it's a distant future, try to convince them to get it approved in the near future, so that we can actively recruit retailers, service industry, restaurants, and so forth to those developments as well.
Thank you.
That was a great distinction too, Kyle. I should have said on the front end, it's a lot easier for a lot of these retailers and restaurants to get them in existing space, because the property owner has everything entitled and all the zoning's done, and they're just signing that contract and getting them in. The development piece does take a lot longer. We actually have gone through that process on this end, where we were able to connect a large retailer interested in buying a parcel or a larger property with that property owner and go through the pricing on that. That's a lot harder to do, but from our end, the system and the process is there. The big issue is timing, as Kyle said. That could be a competitive disadvantage if it takes 2-3 years to get that process, if it could be reduced down to that 1 year, 18-month time frame.
Does the city fast track any of these? I mean, if there's somebody you really, really want, does the city have a method to kind of fast track some of these? I know oftentimes you have these large parcels, and maybe they need some infrastructure development, a sewer hookup or something.
Sure.
That does take time. But on the other hand, I just wonder if the city has a mechanism to kind of fast track if somebody's really in a hurry to get something done.
It's a good question that you bring up. It's not ununique for a developer or a business to ask that same thing of me. Can you fast track my process? My standard answer for that is yes, because we fast track everyone's process. And what I mean by that is, if you were to ballpark and benchmark our plan review process through planning, public works, or building and safety with our, you call them competitor cities or neighboring cities around, you'll find that our processes are faster or on par with what their expedited plan review is. And in other cities charge more for expedited plan review. And I've never really come to a realization in my mind on how you charge someone more for what you could do, and then put them in the front of the line of someone that didn't pay more. So to me, fundamentally, I've never really come to a realization on how we would do that fairly by allowing people to skip the line. So it's been something that we've put in place, that everyone goes as fast as possible, assuming that they get us everything that we need, and they're able to turn around comments and revisions back quickly. They'll find a very easy and quick process with the city. So that's my answer on if we expedite or not, Committee Member Beneke.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from the members? Other comments or questions from members? Finally, other comments or questions from members? Hearing none at this time, we will, and let me say first, thank you, Mr. Farmer, for such an incredible report, and thank you, Mr. Warsinski, for all of the information that you've provided. At this time, we will move over to the subject of reports. Are there any reports coming from members? Any reports or updates coming from members? Ms. Rader.
This Friday is Good Morning Beaumont breakfast at the Sand Trap. And we have Mark Lancaster from the Riverside County Transportation Department as our speaker. So we can beat him up about the 60 project and about the Cherry Valley project and about the 10 freeway. So you might want to attend that and have some fun. And then also we are having our community-wide yard sales on the 17th, 18th, and 19th if you want to stop by the chamber and pick up your yard sale permit.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rader. Other reports or updates from committee members, please? Reports or updates from committee members? Reports or updates from committee members? Hearing none. At this time, we will move on to topics for future agendas. Seeing the 3 topics that are listed on our agenda, are any of those topics of interest to the committee for future discussion?
Number 5, the economic development tools and incentives. I'd like to take another look at that. I know we discussed it in the past, but in particular to the downtown area, I'm thinking there may be something. I'd like to propose something anyway, if we get into that discussion.
Thank you, Member Beneke. We'll ask Mr. Warsinski to include that item on our next agenda for discussion by the committee. And if there are some resources that could be presented, we'd welcome them to be given to us for discussion or reference. Are there any additional topics for future agendas that the committee would like to see? We have number 5 as offered by Member Beneke, economic development tools and incentives. Are there other topics that you'd like to see for future discussion? Hearing none, at this time, we don't have to take a formal vote, but we will entertain a motion and second for adjournment, understanding that our next regular meeting of the Beaumont Economic Development Committee will be scheduled for Wednesday, October the 13th at 4 p.m. I will entertain a motion and second.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It has been moved and properly second. It is so good to see all of you. I hope that you will enjoy the remainder of your day and stay safe and blessed until we see you again on the 13th. If any of you all need me, you know where to find me. I'm always available, and it's good to see you and hear your voices. Take care. Stay safe.
Hey, Vaughn.
Stay safe, everybody.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I
Yes,
sent
sir,
you.
Mr. Vince.
I sent you a message.
You sent me an email?
No, a message on here. A
Oh
chat,
man,
a chat.
you know you're talking to a guy that is just totally. Let's see here. Please send me your phone number again for lunch. Got it. I'll give it to you right here out loud. You know, it's easy for me. 405.
What is it?
405 426 426